Welcome to the Be Empowered podcast with your host, Graham Hopkins. My goal is to help you regain your power by bridging the gap between who you think you are right now and who you really are. In simple language, that is like making your childhood dreams come true. This is for those who want to make an impact in their lives but don't know how to get there. Be ensured, when you know and feel connected to your spiritual mind, you master your world. So welcome everybody to this edition of the Be Empowered Show. I'm your host, Graham Hopkins. Today we're going to continue a conversation that we recently had with Regina Akers. It's a fascinating story. Regina came to an understanding of what it means to feel connected to her higher truth. And I'd like to welcome you, Regina, to the Be Empowered Show.
Thank you. Good to be back.
So, Regina, I often talk about this gap that exists where people are here and they know over here where they should be, but because there's this gap, they can't get there until that gap is bridged somehow. And the gap that I'm talking about is, I believe it's a gap between our heart and our spirit person, our spirit being. Or you could say a gap between our heart and our truth. So we finished off the last video defining what truth is. Do you want to just share with us again what your perspective of truth is? And then I'd like to talk about how people can start bridging that gap.
Yeah. Well, I think that ultimate truth is beyond everything that we imagine. Some people, depending on their tradition, some people, for example, may believe that heaven and hell is truth. Some people may believe that reincarnation is truth. Some people may believe that something about aliens from other worlds guiding us to a higher nature is truth. To me, none of that is truth. Truth is beyond all of that. As Buddha said, truth is beyond being and non-being. It might be helpful to think of truth as being more like the space in the room. The space in this room is always true, no matter who lives in this house, no matter who moves in, who moves out, how we rearrange the furniture, whether we're laughing in this room or whether we're fighting in this room, being born in this room or dying in this room, the space is always the same. Truth is more like the space than the manifestations. The manifestations are all untruth because they come and they go and they change. So again, where people often get truth and untruth confused is they think that things beyond this lifetime are truth. Like if I believe in reincarnation, then I think reincarnation is the truth. But reincarnation still involves change. So reincarnation is still within the realm of untruth, even though it may be experienced.
So here's an analogy I just thought of. If anybody goes to the piano and they take 4 fingers and they hit 4 notes in a row, let's say, keep it simple, A, B, C, D. There's no space there, so it sounds terrible. There's no chord. It's in discord. So we could say that is like what people perceive as their truth. Yeah. Because the truth is that they're hitting A, B, C, and D.
Yes.
But unless there's a space in there, it doesn't make a chord.
Yeah. Good analogy.
So what is space to you? I mean, how do we implement creating space in our lives?
Well, in the beginning, I think it takes creating some kind of physical space. So in the beginning, we may take a special time of day. For me, it was morning, a special time of day that we set aside for prayer, meditation, contemplation of scripture, something like that. But eventually, we need to move beyond that, where we're able to be in the space or return to the space when we notice we've slipped out at any time. So how do you describe the space? You know, I would say it's being in the heart, but my symbol of the heart is probably different than yours. Some people call it being centered, but it's being stepped back from the personality. You're not caught up in the personality's ideas, judgments, decisions about how things should be, wishes for how things should be. You're able to be back and just be kind of an observer, watching everything, while somehow having this sense of all is well. You can't have this sense that things aren't okay. There has to be this sense of all is well. And if you're able to have that sense of all is well, have that detachment, and yet still being present with everything, there's a natural space, even though people might not call it space. It's kind of like the space in your note analogy, because when people hear a chord, they don't hear the space. But like you said, the space is there, or it wouldn't be playing in a beautiful, harmonious way. When we have the space, we may still physically be doing things, we may be saying things, but because of our detachment, our observer role, our being centered in the heart, because of our state of beingness, there's a space in us, and we're in the space as we go about our day.
So in the last video, we talked about pondering. So are you saying that pondering establishes space?
Yes. Yes, I think I am. Because what happens is, when you sit down, whether it's meditation or contemplation, you know, different people seem to lean in one direction or the other, and I would say go with whatever is natural for you. But whether it's meditation or contemplation, this is the time when we are stepping away from listening to our busy, busy mind. All right. If you spend time in the morning or the evening or whenever taking a break from your busy, busy mind, right, and getting into that space, then any skill that you practice, you get better at. And so what happens is you start learning to be able to carry that space into the day. And I had different tools that helped me learn to carry that space in the day. One tool that I used was when I contemplated, I would write down a brief thought that was kind of the core of my contemplation of the morning. I called it a single quiet thought, and I would put it in my back pocket, and I would carry it with me throughout the day, and multiple times in the day I would contemplate it again. This was training me to bring that space into the day. And then later I started saying a mantra. The mantra was, I am that I am. And I would just quietly to myself, many, many times throughout the day, I would say, I am that I am. And I would always say it from the heart with devotion, and then I would always take a bit of space. So, just a bit of space with no thinking or anything, even if it only lasted 2 or 3 seconds, just a bit of space after the mantra. And so there are different ways that we can train ourselves to bring space into the day. And eventually, we just kind of naturally start to pull back from the mind, where the mind might even still be talking, but we don't have that interest in it that we used to have. And that's when we're in that observer role, and that's when we naturally have that space with us all of the time.
Can you explain a little bit about what it means to be the observer to those that don't know what it is?
Yeah. Let me see if I can come up with an example. Well, let's just, since the phone rang, let's just use that. Now you'll have to leave it in the audio, in the video. But since the phone rang, let's imagine that, I had these ideas in my mind that I want to make a good impression here. I'm being very careful to make a good impression. And then, oh, dang, the phone rings, and now I'm upset and all of that. That's not having any space. That's being totally engaged with the environment, totally engaged with the mind. What happened in my case was the observer is just back. I don't know how else to say it, but the observer is just back and able to allow everything to be as it is and kind of move in the flow with it. So when the phone rang, I was able to reach over, remove the phone, make sure I turn off the answering machine, wait for a couple of seconds, and then continue. There's no upset. There's still an interaction with, but there's no attachment to wanting it to be a certain way. There's just being with whatever is in a very harmonious and you know, in a relationship, even in a relationship with a phone that's ringing at what appears to be an inappropriate time, you're still in a relationship with the phone, and you're just dealing with everything in a very relational, harmonious way because you aren't all caught up in your own way of thinking. That's the observer. You're observing life even as you're being a part of it.
So years ago, scientists believed that space was empty. Now they're calling it the field. So do you think space is actually an intelligence?
Of course. Yeah. You know, as you know, my early part of my spiritual path, I was what they call a scribe, you know, because I heard language, I heard words, literally heard words in my mind and could write them down. But at some point that ended. It ended for a very good reason, which we can talk about when you want to, but it ended. And I no longer hear words. So when I go into contemplation, there is only silence. But there's understanding. There's absolute understanding. And in fact, it's a clearer understanding because it doesn't go through any interpretive filter. You know, words have to be interpreted. You know, the word holy, for example, can mean one thing to me and one thing to you. But the very direct silent communication that comes from the space, from the silence, it doesn't use any symbols, and so it doesn't require any interpretation. So it's a very direct, very intelligent communication, and you realize it instantly. Also, words, I mean, listen to how many words I'm having to say in this sentence and how long it's taking. You know, when the intelligence drops, it just drops it all at once. It's not broken up into segments. It may take you 15 minutes to tell somebody what you understood in a nanosecond, fully. So the space has a lot of intelligence. And since we are also that space, we have the ability to understand it. We literally speak its language.
So it's like a digital download.
Yeah, yes.
All at once.
Yes.
So tell me, you call yourself a scribe, not a channeler. What's the difference from your perspective?
Well, it is just, you know, again, somebody else may say it differently. But when I hear about people who call themselves channelers, it's like there's some entity they think they're channeling. You know, there's some person, whether it's from another planet or whether it's a sage from the past, they feel like they're channeling someone else. Although I was always listening as the student, and although there was something there that appeared wiser than the student that was doing the teaching, there was always, I don't know how to explain it, but there was this inherent knowing that this was myself, my true self. And so there wasn't a sense that I was channeling an other, even though at another level that kind of conversation was going on. I was asking questions sometimes and it would answer. But I always knew the sense of separation was up here. But as you go down, down, down towards the heart, the soul, the spirit, it was coming from one. There was no real separation. So that's why I don't call myself a channeler.
People, it seems to me, are always looking outside of themselves for the answers. And that's why they hear these voices. That's why they, they do channeling. Because they're looking for the answers in the wrong place.
Yeah, and also it will come to you if you have an openness to hear it. It will come to you in whatever way you will listen. Even, you know, some ways are maybe more pure or more closely related to the actual truth, and some ways are a little more fantastic and you know, more illusory. But if you'll listen, it will still appear in that way as well. So that's okay. So
tell us why you don't hear these words describe anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first I just have to bring in one more book because there's two books that I've had. The first one was the Holy Spirit's interpretation of the New Testament. And as I mentioned in our first meeting, that took me from where I was when I finished A Course in Miracles to another place. Then there's another book that came that kind of picked me up there and took me further. That book, an inner teacher showed up that seemed to be Ramana Maharshi, which is pretty amazing because I did not know of Ramana Maharshi. Are you familiar with him?
No.
Okay. He's a great sage from southern India, Tiruvannamalai. But I did not have personal knowledge of him, so the fact that he would show up inside of me is rather amazing. But he came and he spoke to me for 6 weeks, and he carried me further. And just to show you quickly, that resulted in another book. It's this one called The Teachings of Inner Ramana. Okay. But the very last thing he taught me in that book was 3 states of mind. The first state of mind is called resistor. The second one is doubter. And the third one is abiding. He said that the resistor is like the common person in the world today who thinks they know who they are. So when I feel fully I'm Regina Dawn Akers and I believe this and I think this and I'm totally into the personality, I'm also totally resisting my truth. So that's called the resistor. When we move on to...
Can I just add there, Regina, that in all of these shows that I'm doing, resistance seems to be a major topic that comes up over and over again.
Yes, we're good at resisting.
Yeah.
And then the second state of mind was called the doubter. And the doubter is actually more progressive toward truth than the resistor, because now you're beginning to doubt everything that you thought was true. You're beginning to doubt your beliefs, doubt that you're the personality, and somehow you're starting to recognize wisdom, whether it seems to be within, or whether you're reading a book, or whether you're listening to an outer teacher. You're still recognizing something in you is resonating, but you don't yet get it that this truth is in you. So you're also doubting the truth. You're doubting, you think it's an other and you have to learn it. You don't have it. So you're kind of in this stage of doubting in both directions. You're doubting what used to be true for you, and you're still doubting the truth as well. So that's the doubter. Yeah. That's the doubter. And if you read NTI and the Teachings of Inner Ramana, you will see that I was definitely the doubter. You'll see my questions, especially in the Teachings of Inner Ramana. You'll see the questions I ask of the inner guru and the answers I get. So I had this long doubter phase. Well, the third state of mind is abiding. And basically what the Inner Ramana told me was that if I could hear this wisdom as clearly as I was, all I had to do was drop being the doubter. And the wisdom would always be right here. And I could start abiding in it. I no longer needed to be the one that was sitting down with a paper and pen and asking, closing my eyes and asking an inner teacher, how should I see this? Blah, blah, blah. I could just know how to see it. It was here. If I could ask in that way and get answers, I could know. So I was told it was time for me to move from the doubter to abiding. But in order for that to happen, the appearance of a separate inner teacher had to completely fall away. So that I would kind of, you could say, stand on my own 2 legs without leaning on that crutch anymore. So at that point, the sense of being a scribe, the ability to hear a voice, went away. The wisdom has never gone away. But now the wisdom comes in that silent way that I told you, and now there's no sense of any other at all. There's just abiding with what is now, what clarity is here right now, and staying in tune, staying in harmony. That is a way of life.
Can you clarify that a little bit more? Because I suspect that there's not that many people who know how to abide.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't have in the beginning either. So, that's why I think the doubter phase comes first. I think that we probably can't in most cases unless it's incredible grace. I mean, you hear about people like Eckhart Tolle and Byron Katie who go from, one extreme to the other in an instant. But many of us, it's a process. And so we don't go directly from resistor to abiding. We go through this doubter phase. In the doubter phase, again, you have this sense that you're learning truth, and you have this sense that you're letting go of your desires and your beliefs. But there comes a point when truth just begins to feel more natural for you. You're more at home in the truth than the personality. And when you reach that point where you're more at home in the truth and the personality, any lingering thoughts you have that you still need to practice, that you still need to learn, those things need to be dropped. They become the last obstacle at that point. They were helpful for a while, but now they become the obstacle. And so you have to drop those ideas and just start being at home in the truth, abiding. And you will know in every moment what to say, how to be, you know, even how to think. And so when you're ready for that, you're ready. But yeah, there may be a learning phase that occurs first.
I must be a major doubter because nothing's ever happened easily for me. But one of the good things about my character is that I don't give up. You know,
Yeah.
Anybody who plays sport against me knows that. I don't give up. And so it is with the spiritual life. I just didn't give up. And yeah, I mean, abiding is a major key in all of this, learning how to be instead of driving to become.
Yes, perfect. Learning how to be instead of driving to become. And, you know, lots of people will tell me they can't hear inner guidance. Sometimes I think it's because they're trying to listen for something more fantastic than what inner guidance is. Now, don't get me wrong. Fantastic inner guidance comes from time to time. Like, you know, when I was guided to read the New Testament, guided to start awakening together. But those things are few and far between. Years and years will pass. There's other guidance that's here in every moment, and that guidance typically says things like, it'll literally say, shh, or depending on your personality, it could say, shut up. But it doesn't mean it in a judgmental way. That's just the way that you're willing to hear it. It'll say, shh, don't say anything. You know, stop talking now. Drop that. You know, be still. Wait. Accept. It's okay. Don't worry. I mean, it's literally guiding you on how to be. And that is the most typical kind of guidance, and it's always available. And most people do hear it. They just ignore it because they would much rather get angry and say, here's what I wanted, why weren't you listening to me, rather than drop it, which is what the inner guidance is saying, and they don't want to. The desire to have my way is much stronger than the desire to listen to that inner intuition. So a part of what we need to do is actually work on our desire. We have to start realizing what we really want. And a part of that is noticing how much listening to ourselves is causing us to suffer. You know, if I'm trying to get you to do something my way, dang it, why don't you do it? You can tell I don't feel at peace. I'm not happy. I'm suffering, right? When I finally learn to drop it. Just let him be as he is. You know, whenever the voice tells me to, I start feeling that peace. You know, I'm laying down my burdens, literally. And so as we start to really pay attention to how we feel when we are listening to ourselves and when we're listening to that inner intuition, we'll start learning that we like the inner intuition a lot better because it's keeping us happy, at peace, relaxed. We're the ones that are upsetting ourselves.
So does judgment destroy abiding in any way?
Yeah. Every time. I mean, gosh, what could I judge right now? Let me see if I can make up something. I could judge that you should be in a room with like some kind of a professional screen behind you, you know? And then if I'm judging that, I'm going to be bothered the whole time we're having this conversation. You know, the clarity is not going to come through naturally. We have to be willing to let everything be exactly as it is. Like, again, when the phone rang a while ago, this is what is right now. It doesn't mean we don't deal with it. You know, sometimes people think that acceptance means you don't deal with it. But, you know, when I have to, if my bladder gets full and I have to go to the bathroom, I accept that. I don't resist it and say, oh no, you know, I wish I didn't have to go to the bathroom. I accept that and I go to the bathroom. I accept it and I deal with it. Right? We all know how to accept and deal with things. It's completely natural. But somewhere in our minds we get confused and think there's some kind of a line there where you have to judge something before you deal with it. And it's not true. You can accept it. This is how it is, and now this is what needs to be done. And as you learn that beingness that is acceptance, then you're happy and at peace, and things are still being managed and taken care of, but you aren't fighting and resisting life anymore.
So are you saying that and resistance are at the other end of the poles?
Say that again, I didn't understand.
Acceptance and resistance.
Yes, yes. Yeah, you could call them opposite ends, yes.
So, Regina, I listened to a video this afternoon that really meant a lot to me, and I'll put it on the Be Empowered Show website so people can actually click on this and have a listen. But I was wondering if you could just describe this vision you had regarding war and its impact on you in regards to gratitude.
Yeah, it might even be clearer in the video, but I'll do it again because I think when I did the video, it was much closer to when the event occurred, and now many years have passed. So now it's a memory.
Yeah.
But there was this morning when I had this vision, and what I remember is that the vision was very, very, very long. It was almost like a movie in that it had many scenes, and it seems to me that each of the scenes were what I would call progressively more difficult or progressively advanced in the learning cycle. Like I started with a simple learning and then went to a more difficult one and a more difficult one and was accepting them along the way, which prepared me for the next one. But even immediately after this thing ended, I could only remember the last scene. I know that these others happened, but I could only remember the last one always. And in the last scene, I was taken to a place where there was a war, and it looked like what had just happened maybe bombers had just left the area and had just bombed the city. I saw, bombed buildings, broken down buildings, burning buildings. I saw dead bodies, maimed bodies. I saw, mothers crying, looking for their children. Just everything you would see right after the bombers left a city, and it was awful. I mean, there was just nothing nice about it. And then I was moved from that to what I'll have to call formlessness. There was no form, no scene at all. It was not darkness. It wasn't like blindness, so I don't know how to describe this. But I was moved to this state of formlessness. But I knew that in the state of formlessness there was aliveness there, and what this aliveness is what we are, not as humans, but what we are as mind or something like that. And I knew that this was our wrong mind, not our right mind, not our spirit. This was our wrong mind at a formless level, and it was making everything in that war. We were the ones that were creating that war as a one. But I was also with, again, what we call the Holy Spirit, which was absolute clear seeing. And I was seeing this from the Holy Spirit's perspective, this formlessness that was creating the war. And the amazing thing was there was only gratitude for it. There was, it wasn't judgment. Lots of people, when they think, oh, we are responsible for the wars, we're responsible for the cancer, they get this sense of guilt or judgment. There was no judgment in it at all. In fact, there was only just immense gratitude. And the only way to explain the gratitude is that it was gratitude for our perfect freedom. If using the symbol of our Father, the Christian symbol, if our Father had created us and said, you can do this and this and this, but here's a line, and if you cross that line, you're bad, you can't do that. Well, then we wouldn't be absolutely free. There's no line. And so even though we may do things that are very, very painful, like war, what the Holy Spirit's gratitude for was the perfect freedom. The love of the perfect freedom was so valued that even what we do with it can't diminish that value. And it was an amazing experience. And that's, so I understand now that there is no guilt at all, no matter what we do. Now, that doesn't mean there isn't suffering at this level. And so there's still the reason for us to question, what do we want to do with our minds, right? Ultimately, we all desire happiness and joy and peace, and so we can learn how we're getting in our own way, and we can start changing the way we think and changing the way that we be so that we become, happier, more peaceful beings. But at our worst, we're not guilty because of that perfect freedom.
I've written a book which is free on our website, beempoweredgroup.com, and it's called Know Your True Value and Worth. It's exactly how you've described it.
Yeah. And
because,
it's funny.
Because God sees us as totally worthy.
Yes.
We can enjoy that and be grateful for what we've got because there is no judgment.
Right.
I think if over the period of time I do these shows, if I get one message out there, Regina, it's the fact that God is unconditional love. There is no judgment.
Right. Right. Just like, back to the analogy I used, actually, I think it was in this video about the space in the room at the beginning of this video. The space in the room is not judging the furniture in the room. The space in the room is not judging whether the room is clean or dirty or what I say or what I do in this room. The space in the room is just providing the space for the room to be used. So God is much like that.
Yeah. See, I think people should be running to God, because if they knew how to feel connected to their own truth, then they'd feel connected to God, and that is a sense of unconditional love, and everybody wants that. Everybody
wants that. Yeah, and the amazing thing is that as we get more and more connected to God in whatever way we do, our beingness actually also naturally aligns. Sometimes people think you need guilt to make people be good. If you can't tell your kids you're guilty if you do this, they're going to do the bad thing. But that's not true. All you have to do is become aligned with the inner God self, and your natural goodness actually starts to come out, and anything that really isn't helpful, anything that causes suffering, starts to fall away, because you're really becoming your own truth, and your own truth is truly good and beautiful and loving.
Totally. Well, Regina, this has been a wonderful, wonderful conversation. I've truly enjoyed it. Let's just take a moment. Is there anything that you would like to finish off with that would inspire people to really pursue overcoming that gap and feeling connected?
Yeah, well, speaking to those who have felt connected at any time, whether it was one day when you fell on your knees at church or, whatever it was, if you just remember how deep and valuable that experience was and start to contemplate that, it's kind of like everything else dims in comparison. Like one of the things I really like to do, I like to travel, but I have learned through my deep contemplations that I would much rather contemplate than travel. And if one day someone told me you can either contemplate or travel, which I don't think they will, but if they did, I would say, oh, contemplate. I will give up traveling, because I've learned that this is what makes my soul sing. This is what really makes me happy. The other stuff is just icing on the cake. And so as we spend more and more time getting connected and noticing how whole and how fulfilled and how open we feel, then we want more and more of that, and we will find our way to more and more. So it speaks for itself, I guess, is the answer.
Definitely. Well, on the other side, I get some of my deepest contemplation when I'm in the air, so we're all different.
Yeah. Yeah, I usually am sitting very quiet in a chair, but I do love to travel, and I do travel a lot. But I have a boyfriend who I've been with for 23 years, who is not on the spiritual path, and sometimes when we go on vacation, he's planned the vacation. We have to get up and go every morning, get up and go, and I don't have that space in the morning, and I just notice that that the space is more valuable, especially when for a week it just isn't there.
Yeah. Well, I truly thank you, Regina, and I'd like to thank everybody watching this show for hearing us. And we trust that you do learn to provide that space for yourself and learn to connect with your higher truth. So we'd like to thank you, both Regina and I'd like to thank you for being with us today. I'm your host, Graham Hopkins. I'd just like to ask the viewers a favour. If they could go to iTunes and leave a review, that would be a great assist in getting this message out to the world so that people can learn to create that space and feel connected. When you leave a review, it increases the ratings of the show, and of course we telecast to a wider audience. If they've got any questions regarding Regina's ventures, maybe you could just give your websites again, Regina.
Sure. ReginaDonAkers.com. That's the website that's dedicated to my teachings. And then awakening-together.org. That is the online church that I founded.
Excellent. And if any of you'd like to go to Amazon and download my book, it's called The Manifesto of Your Inspirational Mind. And I think you're probably starting to pick up what the inspirational mind is, because it's exactly what Regina's been talking about. So, thanks folks. On behalf of Regina and myself, we wish you every blessing going forward. Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to the Be Empowered podcast. For more on regaining your power by bridging that gap between who you think you are right now and who you really are, go to www.beempoweredgroup.com and enter your name and email address to receive a free ebook and get notified of any upcoming podcasts. Remember, when you know and feel connected to your spiritual mind, you master your world. Changing your energy transforms your life.